Welcome back. So how's everybody doing?
Doing all right. Yep. Took Marco to Montana State University this weekend, so I am now officially an empty nester.
Oh, man.
Boo-hoo.
Here we go.
Yeah.
What year's Carlo this year?
Carlo's a junior.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So junior and freshman. Yep.
We have a long ways to go, Blake.
Yes.
Yes. Very long way.
Better start saving now.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, let me tell you.
Well, good. Well, so I've been getting a lot of questions lately. I don't know about you two about getting the home ready to go on the market. So
Definitely.
how do you handle that? What do you think is the best advice?
I mean, the first thing I tell everyone is it's not 2001 anymore. You just can't stick a sign in the yard and get 4 offers the same weekend. You need to actually prepare and put your best foot forward. That's the first thing I always start off with, because some people were in the market during that time and things were crazy. They didn't have to do certain things that we recommend now. And you get one first impression, and I always just reiterate that you get one first impression to the market, so why not make it your best? That's kind of how I start off things. How about you, Christine?
Yeah, I definitely bring that up, that it's not, all houses aren't just selling right off the get-go. And making sure that the house is properly prepared is really important. And from that, your first impression really starts when the buyer pulls up to the curb. And so making sure that the appeal of the home from that very first moment is exactly where it needs to be is very important. So, for example, making sure the exterior paint is crisp and clean. If the paint's recent, if it's been painted recently outside, maybe it doesn't need to be repainted, but maybe it needs to be power washed, right? So if there's dust and debris and dirt around. Another one of my big pet peeves for the outside of the house is making sure the lawn is very green and that the entire yard is weed-free. Small details like that make a big difference, even if a buyer may not be able to identify what it is about the house that seems off. Maybe it's in their subconscious. They still notice it. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and I think it's interesting when you bring up paint. A lot of houses in our area have stucco, for instance, with stone. That's a very particular color. And in the era it was built, maybe the mid-2000s, that is the way that it matched really well. And people don't think there's a way to change it. How do you two approach that type of conversation?
You had a specific
listing? I've actually had 2 listings that were exactly that this year so far. Kind of the earth tone-ish stone, and then kind of the peachy adobe kind of color stucco, which was really dating the home a lot. And both of the sellers thought, there's really no other color to paint the stucco because that's the color of the stone. And so what we did is we had an interior designer, really a design architect, come and look at the colors and figure out what was the best way to address that. And both houses, we wound up painting a very light cream color with the trim pulling out the color from the stone, and they looked really amazing.
Yeah, I thought so.
And really fresh and much more modern. So there's definitely ways to address it. Even another great example of that is brick. A lot of times brick has an off color. There's sometimes weird eras where the brick is just not looking right. And it's really easy to paint brick. And a lot of people don't think that you can do that. So you can address a lot of different color issues on the exterior of a home with paint.
And that leads right into the interior too. You can do the same
Absolutely.
to the walls, and it's surprising just how much changing a paint color to something more neutral. And we've heard that in the real estate world a long time. Changing it to a neutral is important, but it really does bring up the feel of the home to make it feel up to date without having to change every component of the house. Another thing that I like to focus on, especially with some upper end properties, is landscaping. So there's simple things we can do like mulch, for instance.
Right.
But beyond that, every dollar you invest in landscaping is typically returned according to national statistics. So getting people to see that, we could even potentially redo landscaping with a full redesign and get our money out of it is super important to be able
Absolutely.
to communicate. Yeah.
100%.
So how do you all evaluate how we should invest our dollars into these renovations that we might be doing to get a property ready for market?
I think it's like most things, it's very house specific. When we go into a home, whether it's newer, 20 years old, 30 years old, doing like good, better, best pricing. So if we were to sell it as is today, no renovations, this is kind of where I think the market could take this. And then if you were to do like new carpet, new paint, let's say something clean, new floors, this is where it would be. And then if you were to like do a kitchen remodel, a bathroom remodel, this is where you would be, and this is what it would price for. And sometimes people think they need to do all of these things, but at some point the return on investment isn't worth it. So kind of meeting somewhere in the middle is what I recommend with my folks when I sit down right away.
Yeah, I find that almost always if a house is dated or the condition might not be that great, maybe it's been well lived in, that paint and flooring are two of the best return on investment because it really freshens the home a lot and doesn't take long to do and isn't that costly compared to like what you said with the kitchen or a bathroom remodel goes. So I think doing those easy things are usually the things I recommend up front. And like you, Blake, I talk about, if you were to sell it as is, what would we be looking at for a listing price and how long would it sit on the market too? Because not only is it going to sell for less when you're not doing some of those easy things like paint and carpet or maybe a refinish of a hardwood floor, it's not only going to price less or sell for less, it's going to probably take much longer to sell. So that actually adds another cost in there. So definitely looking at those.
Another thing that I get sometimes is, some people with large custom homes will be looking at prices that new construction custom homes are getting. And there's usually a pretty big discrepancy on a price per square foot basis. And sometimes that owner may have bought or built at a price that they could afford to do a full, really nice custom remodel and sell and get their money out of it to get that price point. Now it's, you have to evaluate the cost
right.
And not go too far like we've been talking about, but it's possible sometimes to do that. And to your point, Christine, that really limits your time on market. And besides, sometimes it's a little fun to do a project like that. So, switching gears a little bit from that, another thing that's really important when we're listing a home and something we get asked a lot about is how long am I going to be on the market? And when is the best time to list my property for sale? How do you respond to that?
I think it really, it's going to depend upon when that conversation happens, right? So there are a lot of different things to consider. First and foremost, what the seller's needs are, I think, right? So it's does that seller need to sell the house right now because they're moving out of the area? They're getting relocated for a job. Maybe like me, their kids have moved out of the area and want to be closer to their children. So it first has to start at what the motivation of the seller is. What's driving them to want to list their home? And then if it's something that's urgent, like there's a specific reason why they're needing to sell, again, they're relocating, let's say, then it's really talking about how can we accomplish this in the quickest fashion and maximize the money the best. So, for example, let's say it was right at Christmas time. Probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put the house on the market the week before Christmas, but let's get prepared for right after Christmas then. So there's definitely seasonality in the market. And then, of course, other things play into that too, as well as the economy and things like that. But typically our seasonality in our area is the spring usually starts in February-ish, is really strong through about the end of May. We get a little bit quieter in the summer, then it picks back up in the fall, and then right around Thanksgiving it gets quiet again. So if it's a seller that has some time and is forward planning, maybe isn't relocating out of the state, then I say, let's look at seasonality. Let's look at how we can best position to take advantage of what the market brings during those seasonal high points.
Right. Well, and I think to your point, evaluating the data is so important because a particular neighborhood can have its own seasonality.
Correct.
That we need to factor in. And so when, there's a lot of headlines right now about low inventory across the nation, and some sellers might believe that means they could price it really high, get on the market and get under contract really quickly. And based on the individual market, that might not be the case.
True.
So
very true.
I think it also changes if somebody's held a property as an investment property. And that might, change things. What do you think about that?
I think so. And I think, especially for investment properties, it's like, okay, how is the market going to absorb this? Is it going to be another investor? Is it going to be someone who's going to purchase the property as a primary residence? And figuring out kind of who your audience is, I think, is really important if you're going to offload an investment property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, keeping in mind that end user, when we have an investment property or a property that is coming off of trying to come up with words here, Christine, and they're not popping to me.
Well, don't look at me. I'm the old lady. I never can remember words. So you'll have to look at Blake for that.
Let me help.
Probably coming off of an estate. Might
yeah.
have some different things to, get ready for market.
Right.
And also different motivations of the seller. Going back to your point about Margaret's Hemming, we might factor that into the data as well.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing that I think people often forget when listing their home, and I don't want to put anyone into a box, but furniture is really, really important. Mm-hmm. And having conversations about furniture tastes. We partner with a staging company, and oftentimes if it's someone who's lived in the home for maybe 20, 30 years and they have an acquired taste of furniture, sometimes a little bit larger than the space needs, I make the recommendation for them to move out and let us bring stuff in to make it a little bit more modern and a little more less taste specific to the market. I've really found that has been my tactic recently, is getting folks out so we can really prepare it the best.
Well, and I think there's another advantage too with having a seller move out in advance. Definitely to stage the property. When we're listing a home, we're trying to make that home look like a model home. The reason why these large national builders do model homes is because that sells, right? People see the beautiful furniture, the fresh paint, the spaces that look like they're straight out of Architectural Digest or HGTV. So that's definitely a huge advantage to having a seller move out so that we can really get that space looking the best possible, like a model home. The other advantage, though, I think, too, is that just makes it so much easier for folks when we're having showings. And, it's hard, I think, for a lot of people to live comfortably in their home when they're worrying about when's that next showing coming, or just when you're getting ready to get home from work and relax, there's a showing.
Yeah.
So,
not to mention, we're all so busy these days.
Yeah.
And so to fit in a showing that requires you to get the dogs out and the kids out and have the home in perfect condition takes a lot of logistical planning. And so you're right. A lot of people are choosing to do that these days. Get out, get it staged, and get all of the media and pictures done.
Right.
Yeah. Another question I've been getting a lot lately is about agent experience and what value does that bring to the table? I think it's probably to do with the recent NAR changes, National Association of Realtor Commission changes, but it seems like people are really investigating their brokers. Are you two finding that too?
Yeah, I think it's been. I feel like sellers, because they're investing money in getting their home sold, have always had interest in knowing. Most people, I think, have had interest in knowing what the background of the brokers are that they're interviewing. I do think, though, it's even brought more attention has been brought to it of late because of the lawsuit.
Yeah, I think the news, I think it's educating people more in like one specific avenue. And I think people are just more conscious about the decision. And I think with the brokerage community changing, people are really wanting to trust who they're working with, and they are doing their due diligence a little bit differently in terms of qualifications, sales volume, years of experience. Those are questions that I get, which I love working with both of you because me being a little bit newer, working with two seasoned brokers really has helped me be able to provide that confidence to my sellers.
I think another question that's coming up more often now is not just your overall experience, but the experience for that particular part of the market that house falls in. So whether it be a luxury home, an investment property, maybe it's more of a mountain type home, a very geographic specific home. I think sellers are wanting now to understand more like what your specific experience is for that particular product or that particular home.
Yeah, 100%. So what's your advice to a home seller in order to, what questions should they be asking their agent that they're interviewing based on their property type?
I think price point, especially on the higher end. If you have experienced averages on market, what's your process, and kind of really what's your value add? I think every market has like sub-markets.
Right.
And being familiar with that and being able to speak to it, I think is really, really important. I think anyone can do a listing contract, put a sign in the yard, but that is not what it takes to sell homes right now.
Right.
And also, I think it's important, especially if you're looking in the luxury market, to feel comfortable with your agent's ability to market the home digitally. All real estate these days is essentially sold digitally. And it starts there, but then what is your agent doing to sell the home when the buyer actually shows up? So are they attending showings for your buyers to help them understand what the true benefits and features of the home are? Those are things that not everybody's doing out there.
Yeah, I think having a pulse on the market is really important. I think when we're pricing a home, we're looking at the data as it stands, but things shift, and having a pulse on the market on a regular basis, I think, is really, really important. And being aware of who's your competition, what's absorption rate for this price point, are you competing against new construction? If you are, like, what are the pros of new construction versus your property, and like how do you value engineer both to kind of make it a comparable price? And I think responding to the market, I think, is huge because things do change.
What about if you're a seller who is dealing with an estate for your family? What is important to talk to that agent about?
For the seller to ask what questions?
Yeah, like the executor of the estate.
I think making sure that the agent that they're hiring understands the ins and outs of an estate sale, make sure that the title is properly handled, depending upon what part of the process that estate is in, making sure that all that is in the right spot. And then I also think oftentimes what we see with an estate sale is that there are multiple players, right? So perhaps 4 siblings. And so really making sure that agent has had that experience, has really good communication, understands if all 4 of them have equal say, or if there's just one executor, are they going to work with just that one person? So there's a lot of intricacies that go on with an estate sale. I think the other thing that is good to ask is if the home still is furnished, which oftentimes it is, right? Making sure that agent has resources for the executor to be able to dispose of those furnishings, because that is a big headache for a lot of people. And so really asking that agent what their resources are, in particular to the nuances of an estate sale, I think is an important thing to know.
I want to highlight a point that you made about the agent playing kind of a mediation role between the multiple players that are at the table. And even if you are an executor that might feel like they have full control to execute the estate, often there's other players at the table that you might not be considering. So a seasoned agent will probably ask you, that has experience with this, who are the players at the table? Who do we need to consider here? If they don't ask that question, that might be a red flag.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get an executor that calls you and they tell you, well, I guess I'm the executor. Like, now what do I do?
Yeah.
And like having a resource, like having a good attorney, a good accountant, working with a good title company,
right,
and kind of bringing like your sphere and our partners to the table is really important. I've dealt with 3 estates this last year, ironically, and one question I ask is like, how much money does the estate have?
Right.
Because a lot of times the people who are facilitating the transaction, like, is there money for us to use, or how do we leverage this property and get it on the market at best value for the family? at a good price. And that's what I like about our brokerage
Yeah.
is that we do have access to some cash to help make some of these improvements.
Right.
And we can really help facilitate that and just have one less hurdle
Right.
for them to work with. Because not only are they trying to offload this property, but they're also processing a loss usually as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely true.
So piggybacking off of that, sometimes I am surprised, even at very sophisticated sellers and buyers, that they might not have a lot of experience with legal and accounting resources. Do you find that too?
I think it can happen across the board, right? Mm-hmm. So regardless of how sophisticated or unsophisticated somebody might be, I don't think that necessarily plays into whether they have good legal and financial support or knowledge. I don't think that there's, across the board you could say, this person I expect does or this person doesn't.
Good point. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of people that don't have
absolutely.
resources, right?
Very many people who don't.
And there's a lot of implications in real estate with both taxes and legal issues that people might not ever assume. It's really, with the help of an agent, it's easy to get into real estate and sell multiple properties in your lifetime. But it's so much better when you have access to good resources, in my opinion.
Definitely true.
And good people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what's happening in the market right now? What are you all seeing in terms of, the investor space, luxury space, and all of the spaces we work in?
It's been great for the investor market. Rates are coming down. So the bottom line's looking a little bit better for investors. Inventory's up a little bit. So we're seeing more negotiations in terms of different concessions for condition. I think the early August was a great time. I think people now are kind of last minute vacations and then kind of starting school.
Right.
So I think after the holiday in September, I think we're going to see a really big splash. And I think things are really going to start moving even more.
Are there any markets the two of you are watching in particular?
I mean, not really. I think all along the front range, we're seeing consistent trends in terms of like average pricing. It's really been flat this last month over month. Mm-hmm. And we have seen an uptick in closed transactions across the front range.
Right.
However, with that closing sales being really consistent, inventory is still climbing.
Yeah. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I've been watching two markets kind of really closely in the luxury space. So Timnath average sales price in the luxury sector is 12% up year over year, which is extraordinary growth.
Right.
When you're talking about that price point. And the other market that I continue to watch is Estes Park. So through the pandemic, the luxury market really awakened in Estes Park with a lot of properties that had never hit the market before coming on and selling at really high price points. And we're seeing right now the inventory levels in Estes Park drop in the luxury space pretty significantly. And so I'm curious to see what that means for prices in the next year. The other thing that I'm kind of watching right now, and I don't know if you two have particular neighbors that you're watching this in, but there's a few neighborhoods, Harmony Club in Timnath, Fossil Lake Ranch in Fort Collins, that I think in the next 10 years are ripe for investment opportunity because we have a lot of older inventory, I'm saying like 10, 15 years old, that can be remodeled and made to look very similar to new constructions.
Right.
I'll be watching those pieces too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been watching a lot of new construction inventory. They keep building.
That's true. I saw a stat today that, to that point, that new construction inventory is like 15% higher than it was this time last year, and it's significantly higher than the resale market inventory.
Right.
That's still pretty limited. So
yeah.
Well, this was fun. Again this week.
Yes, it was.
Well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.